The Tuesday, April 19th, 2022 meeting of the Carleton School District Board of Directors is called to order. Mrs. Burleson, I haven't had you share the pleasure to say what you want to please.
I would love to.
Great, awesome.
I think Mr. Apple might have heard my announcements one time when we had our speakers out in the neighborhood.
I think you did.
You hear them? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Apple.
Here.
Director O'Brien. Here. Director Frank.
Here.
Director Puskar. Here. Director Gagliano. Here. Director Hochschild.
Here.
Director Simpson. Here. Director Zelensky.
Here.
Director Schreiber.
Here. There's a moment at the beginning of each meeting where we invite the public to ask any questions about items that are on our agenda for this evening. Does anybody have any questions for tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. Under section 2 of our agenda, we have minutes from previous meetings. I'll entertain a motion to approve the following 2 items. Number 1, the minutes of the March 15th, 2022 meeting, and number 2, the minutes of the April 12th, 2022 committee meeting. A motion for those 2 items.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Thank you. Any discussion? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. I'll report that we had an executive session prior to this meeting where we discussed personnel matters, potential litigation, and a confidential student matter. And I'll turn to Dr. Crater for the superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. We actually have 2 reports in addition to mine. We'll start with Mrs. Dunker from the high school. She has an update on services being provided at the junior senior high. Mrs. Dunker.
Good evening, everyone. I won't try and hand you any handouts this time. I know you have them electronically. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for the opportunity to serve the junior senior high school community and the wonderful district here at Carleton. It's been such an honor and I've had such a good time. Really excited for the year to be wrapping up and excited to share some of the things we've been working on here in our building. If you notice on the board report, and I don't know if Dr. Carter's sharing that right now, but you'll notice that some of the graphics are similar to the board report I gave back earlier in the fall semester. And for one of the areas of focus here up at the junior senior high school with our faculty and staff alike has been really focusing on the themes of the year and how we can get students back into the building and back into the sense of normalcy of what it means to be a student and how to enjoy academic life and not just academics but athletics, artistic elements of what it means to be a student here at Carleton. So you'll notice that everything we do is really rooted in the community here and how we're building character among all of our students in opportunities in the classroom and out to help them exude excellence in all that they do. We're excited to continue our partnership with Allegheny Health Network and the Chill Room. One of the programs that the Chill Room has brought is the Chill Project with Ms. Sheets as our classroom educator here at the junior senior high school. You'll notice some of the graphics of the Chill Room by the numbers on that second slide that Dr. Crater will share. Our room has been extraordinarily popular for our students here at the junior senior high school from grades 7 to 12. And you'll note that all of the drop-ins from January skyrocketing from 559 to 891 in February for students familiarizing themselves with the space with Ms. Sheets' strategies. The chill skills will feature in the Cougar Connection that Ms. Woolery helps us put out every single bi-weekly. Really exciting strategies for students, not to just manage stress, but how they can overcome and notice triggers before they happen and what they can do to kind of anticipate and mitigate those adverse effects. And I notice a lot of students doing it, not just in the classroom, but also in the cafeteria, sometimes after school. We have students that when they engage in conflict, peer conflict, and we go to resolution in the office, they'll talk about some of the box breathing activities or the positive reframing of a stressful situation, how they can take an unwanted situation and make it a positive. So those are all things that we're trying to teach through our character education here at the high school. And Ms. Sheets has done a great job. We're excited to continue our partnership with Allegheny Health. Our teachers in our October and November professional development sessions, respectively, worked on our Notice Talk Act grant. which just underlines how we already engage in meaningful conversations with students, and it also helps students to find words to talk about situations they might have experienced during COVID, that stressful home life, or coming back to school. What does that look like in the brick and mortar setting, or if I'm an online student? How can I not just surmount these stressors that I have experienced, but how can I actually capitalize on them and learn, and how I can become a better student by using some of these strategies. So we're excited to expand our program with Allegheny Health next year, and using our 2 school-based therapists, Ms. Bice and Ms. Lacey, to further expand our reach to our students, and just making sure that every student in the building has a parent or a teacher or a counselor, an admin that they can rely on. And the CHILL project has helped us to reach further areas of students. You'll also notice that there are 2 graphics there of some of the CHILL skills that we give out to students. And these are little worksheets that they'll do in the morning mindfulness sessions. You can notice some of the posters around the cafeteria that Ms. Lexi has made, really evangelizing the message of the CHILL project and how we can use small groups during lunch or study hall or in the morning to engage in mindfulness and being focused on what we're dealing with at hand, and how they can give words to feelings, and then again, making a plan moving forward. All of these strategies have really helped our students in the academic arena, and we're excited to expand our after-school supports, our tutoring program, Tuesdays and Wednesdays for after-school programming with our teachers in one of our classrooms down here after school for about an hour and 15 minutes. Students can come and get some additional help on remediation if they need further enrichment. If they're getting excited for standardized tests coming up in the next couple of weeks, they can get extra help. Individual tutoring and review is available there. And we also have some peers who are dropping down to help out with some of the younger students there too. So some of our National Honor students have come down to help, and that's been a really nice experience to see some peer-to-peer tutoring. Thanks to the Board of Directors and Dr. Prater and our union with our new CBA. Really excited to open the opportunity for a 9-period day next year. So here at the senior high school, we're excited to pilot the new schedule for next year, looking to expand more opportunities for student choice, getting involved in more electives, allowing students to expand their horizons outside of what they would normally take. And so we're excited, and I know Dr. Mantich has worked very hard with our teachers to kind of curate some more curriculum for teachers to better reach our students and where they need to have additional credits, and getting them into areas that they might be less inclined to take a class in, particularly the arts. And so we're excited to see what that will look like. And so I just want to say thank you to the board for that opportunity to expand our students' choices. And our teachers have been using PowerSchool, just like last year, our parent-student portal for a wonderful IT department with Mr. Jones, using the PowerSchool portal to really be the piloting tool to help make this scheduling process much more succinct and concerted and concise. So we're excited to open that up for the next academic year. One of the things that we've been really focusing on here again is that return to normalcy. And I use that word normal in a very light sense, but getting our students to engage in what it means to be a student again. And so one of the things that we were excited about 2 weeks ago was we had junior high gym night, gym and game night, at the same time as the mystery show, sponsored by the Spring Musical cast. And so that's just another awesome opportunity for our kids to engage in what it means to be a student again. And what does that look like? Not just how do we behave in an academic setting, but what does it look like to behave and be a normal student and get to go engage with my peers or friends and run around, put our devices down, unplug and talk to one another, have meaningful conversation. And so we had several teachers, I think there were 5 or 6 teachers who volunteered to come to the event, play dodgeball, chess, giant Jenga, loads of cookies and hot dogs available at the snack stand, and just participate in a good old-fashioned night of fun for the kids, and for younger kids to be kids, where they can unplug from their devices. And that was fun for me to kind of toggle between that gym and game night and then go to the mystery show, where a lot of our patrons of our community, parents, staff members, and even students came to a night where the students got to participate in that really fun, unscripted reading of their mystery show. So we're excited to welcome the Spring Musical in the next couple of weeks here and get back to some of the really awesome things that our students love here at Harlingen. Prom, getting back to junior high gym game night, like I had mentioned. They have a dance coming up, and Kennywood Day. So lots of things to celebrate after a really hardworking, well-deserved year. We got to see our students exude excellence, not just in the classroom, especially our senior students in the physics class. And Mr. Schreiber, I do have to give a shout out to him. We went on an evening field trip with our seniors. Mr. Kosnick is currently out on military leave, serving our military at the U.S. Air Force Base in local Coraopolis, and he invited our students to come out and participate in a flight simulation. I was a little bit nervous, but everything was perfectly fine, and it was a great experience for the students to apply what they had learned in the classroom about lift and thrust and flight, and they got to go, and you'll actually notice in one of the pictures to the far right, that's actually Miss Caroline Rupola. She's our long-term sub for that class, and she is recently certified in physics as well, and has been a great mentor for the students and helping connect Mr. Kosnick to the class, and he's been helping and phone into the class a whole bunch and zooming in to help the students too, because all of the students in this class are post-secondary education students, and so he's excited to help them get ready for their freshman fall in college. So it was exciting, thrilling, and to say you want to go on a field trip is one thing, but students who actually wanted to go outside of the normal school day is something absolutely excellent for this group of students. So I was really proud of them. We had a good time. We're looking forward to some opportunities here for our students at the junior senior high school. Ms. Carrie Gallagher, Mr. Scott Canty, and Ms. Stephanie Barnes in our guidance department do a wonderful job gathering information and siphoning it to our students and our parents, all stakeholders that really need to know about opportunities coming up. The Guidance Google Classroom is available for every student in their particular respective grade level. Lots of opportunities for volunteering, free camps, free classes, classes you can pay for, just lots of jobs. Yesterday I looked on there were 30 job opportunities for students to apply for work this upcoming summer, and we can help students get their permit here, their workers permit here in the high school. So we're excited about that, and it's just a great cluster of information for students. For them to find volunteer opportunities or to find something different that they might not have experienced before. Our guidance department has also done a wonderful job. Mr. Canty has worked with PNC Partner Up program, and this year we have more students than ever participating in our mock interviews on May 12th, and that is going to be at the Consortium for Public Education. Students will have the opportunity to interview and earn entry-level positions at PNC, Giant Eagle, Pitt Ohio Transportation Group, just to name a few. And these are opportunities for students to start this as soon as they graduate with their diploma from Carlinton. So really exciting. We haven't had so many students participate in the program before, but they've been working tediously on their interviewing skills and appropriate behavior and attire as they prepare for these interview skills and preparing their resumes. So it's an exciting opportunity for students as they get ready for post-baccalaureate life. We're also excited to connect our students to one another with our peer mentoring program. We do mention this back in August at our 7th grade orientation. I'm not sure if anyone was here for that awesome event, but as we bring in students to the community here at Carlinton, we want to make sure that every student at junior, senior high school has someone that he or she can identify with and make sure that there is someone that can look after them. And sometimes that's a student, an older student. So this year, Ms. Barnes and Mr. Banaszak, who piloted the program several years ago, connected not just 7th and 8th graders to seniors, but also juniors this year. Because we've had so many students, because of the past disruption of 18 months from normal brick and mortar schooling, students need to reintegrate into the brick and mortar setting of schooling and then their peers too, and getting to know one another. And so they've been meeting every Friday in the gym in the CCC, getting to engage in meaningful conversation. And we're excited to expand that program next year with our upcoming 7th graders. And then last but not least, we're really excited for the summer this year, offering again some enrichment and remediation for students to stay on track to graduate. We are very well aware that the past 18 months has not been a smooth process, but we're trying to help get our students back on the right track so that they can be on the straight and narrow to be on track to graduate with their classmates. And so there's lots of opportunities available, not just with tutoring, but extra remediation in the mornings after school in this summer program, as well as opportunities for students to further engage in the community. And so I know Dr. Mancic has been working on some of the afternoon programming for the enrichment opportunities for students that we did last year. And so we're looking to have even more participation this year, and excited to see what the students will do over the summer as we prepare to open up the school year in August of this year. So I just want to say thank you so much again. It has been an honor to serve And it's humbling to work here with so many people who are so selfless for our students and our community. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time if you have any.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. There are a lot of really great things happening and going on, and it just makes me so thrilled to hear us going back to, what we want for our kids. So thank you and the whole staff for all the hard work that everybody's doing. I hear about all these things, and I'm so excited to hear about them. And so often I think, how are we communicating this to our communities? We hear it here, but how, and I know we have Cougar Connection, and I just think the more that people know about these things that are happening, the better. And then another thing I was thinking when you're talking about the chill room, and it seems like we have like all the bases covered. They're going into the classrooms, the students are going into the chill room and so on. But these techniques, and stress management techniques are really good for everybody. And I thought, well, how do we close the loop and bring those skills into the home and give those skills to the parents as well? So is there any way that we're kind of, moving that into the home and outside of the school?
Absolutely, and I really appreciate the question. I think, especially in our community, there are some cultural dissonances of mental health and normalizing that stigma. And so making sure that, number one, there's a common vernacular in the building across the curriculum of what does that mean to feel triggered, or the thermometer of students who, if I'm feeling really hot, I'm really stressed, if I'm blue, I'm chill, I'm doing okay. Our teachers have adopted that language into their classrooms with models of their thermometers, and some teachers are engaging in our Duquesne research that we piloted through Carnegie Elementary last year. We're also doing that here in 7th, 8th, and 10th grade, here in the mornings with our students in homeroom. So embracing that culture of the language, I think, is important for the teachers to create more buy-in to allow the students to feel comfortable with that. And then we're also excited, Allegheny Health is going to work with us for our opening orientation for this upcoming summer and to the upcoming academic year, to make sure that parents are aware, especially in cultures where that might not be something you talk about at your dinner table or with your children about mental health and stressors. So really normalizing that so that it does become more second nature. And we're also excited, this morning we were talking about standardized tests coming up for PSSAs very quickly and Keystone tests, and how we can engage those strategies for students that might feel a little bit tense or apprehensive before those tests, and how we can have some PSAs. So Ms. Lexi is going to be making some videos to push out to the teachers so that they can play them in the classrooms in the morning, so our students can engage in that mindfulness before they take those tests. So I do think a lot of it comes back to how we can just evangelize and educate not just our students but our families too, and show them that this is a really important piece. But mental health it's a growing area, and especially for our students, they're finding their own ways to express the supports that they need. I will say that the Mental Health and the Chill Project here, that focus in the building, has allowed us to have 96 referrals for our SAP program, our Student Assistance Program, this year. We traditionally have 100 in a school year, and so as of April 1st, having 96 is pretty significant. Of those 96, I think we've had about 65 referrals actually follow through, where we've had paperwork returned from parents stating, I want my student to engage in services, I want to have a point person in the building. And so I think the more we can evangelize what kind of supports we have, the better we can help not just our students here, but our families at home. We know that our families are our first teachers, and so we're all a partnership, we're all a village, and this is our community. So if we can start there, I think we have a lot of room to grow, but we've had a great experience working with Dr. Davies and the entire AHN team, and lots of support from our special education department as well. So thank you so much.
Emily, John has educated us on our mental health program. And essentially, we're head and shoulders above most other school districts. And I really hope that parents realize that our people are there for their kids. And it's almost like the candle underneath the chair that isn't really being told to the public. And we have to get this across in Cougar Connections and so forth. Our mental health program is excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Chill Project currently is on a 3-year waiting list for any schools interested. So we definitely got in at the right time. So I don't know if Grafton's interested in joining at some point, but it's definitely a growing area and much research to be done. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mrs. Dunker. And we have had conversations with AHN in preparation for Grafton for the 2023-2024 school year. As Mrs. Dunker has mentioned, finding personnel in the area of mental health as far as services right now is a bit of a challenge. With our partnership we've had with AHN, with starting out at Carnegie Elementary School, expanding into the junior senior high school, I think it does make Carlinton an attractive location for AHN to expand to include Grafton as well, just based on the services and the types of programs that we have. And it's exciting, and it is remarkable with the amount of services that we can provide to our children across the district in K through 12 at the present time. Mrs. Dunker had also mentioned some information about upcoming PSSAs. Dr. Manich is here to share some information just based off of the 2020-2021 school year in regard to PSSA scores. We recently sent out notification to our community at the high school level in regard to the performance of the 2020-2021 school year, which did end us on a state-recognized low-achieving school. Dr. Manich wanted to shed some additional light on that topic. Dr. Manich.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Good evening, everybody. Since the pandemic began, the Commonwealth and the federal government worked together very collaboratively to make sense of our state assessments and school districts' accountability for those assessments. And during those conversations between the two, the ESSA requirements, and I'm going to use ESSA because it seems like there's ESSA funds and there's ESSA the law, which is the Every Student Succeed Act. The requirements and the mandates have been waived for the 2019-2020 school year and the 2020-2021 school years. If you recall, in 2019-20, the tests were canceled altogether. And in 2021, our instructions were to administer the test, do the best we can, since the federal government did not want to cancel the test for that second year, and they still waived all the federal accountability guidelines for the schools, and those schools are going to be placed on any federal accountability designation as a result of the PSSA or the Keystone test scores. Now, under the Every Student Succeeds Act, the law that they have there kind of places schools in the three different categories. Something they call CSI, which is a Comprehensive Support and Improvement School, a TSI, which is a Targeted Support and Improvement School, and an additional Targeted Support and Intervention School, which they call ATSI. Now, all these were waived under those guys for those 2 years. So we got a letter from the state of Pennsylvania about something called the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit. It said that we were placed on a list that says that the Carlinton Junior Senior High School was in the bottom 15% of the schools in their classification, and they were designated a low-performing school. So in calling the state, we found out that this particular law was overlooked when they started talking about the different waivers. It just kind of fell through the cracks. I mean, in fact, we were told that, well, don't worry about it, don't send out any letters yet, we have conversations going on, so just to hear us again, don't do a thing. Okay, we did. Then we got a letter back to say, hey, you got to send out the letters, we have to go through that. So, for an understanding of what the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit is, it was formed under the auspices of Act 85 of 2012 and amended again under Act 86 of 2016. And it is passed by the Pennsylvania legislature to create a program which we again call the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit Program. Through this program, the Pennsylvania legislature has determined which public schools are considered low-performing schools through the use of a combined performance scores of the 2021 Math and Algebra 1 and the ELA and Literature's PSSA, PASA, and/or Keystone exams. Now, in Pennsylvania, low-achieving schools is defined as a public elementary or secondary school that rank in its designation of elementary or secondary in the lowest 15%. And please note, when they did that, they did not include science or biology PSSA. They didn't include all the different assessments that we give. They just chose ELA and math, either PSSA or the Keystone exam. So since the law requires that there is a lowest 15% be designated as low achieving, it also indicates that there is going to be 15% regardless of how well or how poorly the school performs. What that means is, and I don't want to go into a big math lesson, but everybody was back at school used to say, hey, I want to get graded on a curve. Remember the grading on a curve? Right? Well, you got the normal binomial distribution. There has to be a bottom 15%, regardless of how well you do or how poor you do. So if you can picture a normal binomial distribution, you know, one standard deviation away from the average on the top or the bottom, in the bottom case, that's your 15%. That's how they did this. So regardless of how close we are together, just to give you an example, if everybody did very well, and you did, you know, had a very small standard deviation, your score's going to be high, but there's still going to be a bottom 15%. Somebody's got to be there. That's how they wrote the law. Somebody's got to be there. And of course, if everybody did, you know, pretty much the same, again, if you have a very similar standard deviation, again, there's got to be a bottom 15%. We ended up on the bottom 15%. So, while 2020-2021 was by no means typical, and the scores resulting from the 2020-21 PSSA, we were told that they could still be used to understand your students' overall performance at the time of testing. This is coming to us from the state. However, the test score cannot tell you why the results look the way they do, especially if your student performance differs from the expected or the being observed in the previous years. They also told us, as we were talking about PSSA test scores, that a test is only one piece of a bigger picture. A single test score does not provide a complete or precise measure of the student's achievement. It represents a snapshot of student performance at the time of testing. It is important to consider other relevant measures of the student achievement when interpreting your test results, such as course grades, homework, teacher feedback, performance on classroom assessments, and other measures that can provide additional insight to your students' academic performance and growth. It is also important to consider how conditions for learning for those particular years, which were likely disrupted by the pandemic, they may influence performance, including changes to the student's learning environment, how and where instruction occurred. The opportunity to learn grade level content, was it due to attendance, time spent in receiving instruction, the modality. And, you know, the third one is the student's motivation to test. So when we looked at all these things and what the state was kind of telling us how to deal with the test scores this year, what happened with the federal mandates and their waivers, and this letter, we started looking at some of the causes that we thought, well, what happened? How did we get up on this list? So again, as I looked for some possible causes, again, this was an unprecedented time and no way typical for our students on our performances. The waivers that are mandated of our state assessment caused a lot of confusion to not only our parents, our teachers, and our students. As it turned out, when I started analyzing some of the data, because we did not get any reports from the state as far as data is concerned, I got a raw data file, so I cut it up by hand, and I started doing some of the analytic work, and we found out that 13.3% of our PSSA eligible students did not even take the test last year. So we were automatically having our scores based on the remaining, I guess it was 86.7% of the eligible students. 13% did not even test, 13.3. And as a result, this had an extremely negative impact on our overall performance on these particular assessments because they don't get a score. They get nothing. So when I looked at the rest of the test, on average, our proficiency rates dropped by approximately 15% across the board from our 2018-19 pre-pandemic scores. So when you're dropping 15% across the board and 13.3% of our students did not even take the test, kind of, again, gives you a picture of what was transpiring with our test scores. And the other things that certainly can be attributed to the learning loss are caused by, again, the learning environment, the opportunity to learn the grade level content, and of course, their motivation to test. So, kind of, however, the 13.3% of our non-assessed students certainly had a significant impact on our overall achievement. And it cannot really be ignored when we look at the total picture of our 2021 assessments for that particular. So when we looked at kind of the data and the test scores, that's kind of what we came up with and how we ended up kind of where we are with this Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit. The state did tell us we did have to send the letter out. We did send it to all the households. And we kind of have to have a little bit of an explanation on what it is, why it is, how it came to be, and again, how we ended up where we are at this particular point. So that's kind of what I want to bring out today and talk about in this particular section of the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit. So if you have any questions, maybe I can answer for you. That would help clarify some of this.
I have one question. How, that 13.3% non-participation in the PSSA, how common is that across the board? Or are we
Well,
outliers?
here's the thing. This was made it very difficult this year because we didn't get anything back from the state that says, because normally we get these reports. They're called summer reports. And I get them by building, I get them by test, I get them by grade level. And they kind of tell us where we are as a district, where we are as a building, and then where we are in relationship to the state. We didn't get those. They didn't print them this year because the state technically didn't really care about these particular tests very much, because they're the ones that even provide us with the talking points, and some of which I gave you here today. He says, when you're going to talk about test scores, you need to mention these things. Here's the, why your test scores where they are, and if they're not as good as what they normally are, nobody, I believe, across the state was, this is what they kind of told you to do. So it was very hard to audit, how we were compared to everybody else, because they didn't really provide us with a lot of that information.
So it's possible we had higher participation.
It's very possible we had higher participation. Now, accountability normally is 95%. We cannot fall below a 95% threshold for participation. We didn't make it. All right, we were 86.7%.
So Ed, what's the punishment?
We had to send out a letter. Yeah, it says that we are on the bottom 15% of this very obscure law that.
But the 13% put us under 95%.
Yeah, but we kind of put those kind of things in the letter that we wrote to the parents, kind of, explaining what it was, and also explaining all the good things we really do here, in the district. So, that's pretty much what it is. I believe that the law says if there was a parent who wanted to apply for a scholarship to send their student, because we are a low performing school, to an approved school that accepts Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit money, then they can apply and get the money from the company, who would then get a tax credit for paying that student's tuition. Is pretty much what that's all about.
But just to clarify, as far as the 95% rule,
Yeah.
the state waived that last year.
They waived it, that's why we didn't have any.
Right, so as far as accountability for the 95% rule was one of the many pieces that they waived last year. So there were not any punishments or sanctions against districts who did not meet that 95% threshold. Coming into this school year, there are no waivers,
There are no
everything
waivers.
is back in place. So we do need to be very conscientious of getting 95% of our students to take the test, because now that is an expectation from the state, right?
Ed, do you sense that the 13% are more stellar students that made our overall score lower? Or was it a mixture of kids?
You're going to have a mixture of kids, but I would be, when I looked at the low end students, like I looked at our data that we have, normally on a pre-pandemic year, our below basic category is our lowest category. Okay? So we might have, in a grade level, we might have less than 5% of our kids that fit below basic. We had some tests this year where 60% of the kids were below basic. So there's a lot of things in the data that we look at, that I looked at when I started preparing for this thing, and so it'd probably be a mix of them. So you're going to have students that done well. That's going to raise our proficiency rate. Because if you take 100 students in a class of every year, every one student's 1%. So the 13% of the kids that didn't take the test, let's say half of them would have been proficient. That would have raised us 7%, right? And what did I say, we were 7% across, 15% across the board on our tests for proficiency rates. So all the other factors may have only included 8% drop based on all the other factors that we dealt with for the past 2 years. We'd cut that down. Just based on some averages.
So, I just want to clarify that 13% of students that didn't participate in the test, they're removed from the denominator, right? So their score of 0 is factored into the test.
Yes, when you have, if you do not test, if you're a non-assessed student, it has to be marked in page 2. The rules, which are not waived for this, is what every student that is eligible for PSSA has a book with a sticker on it with their name. Now, you turn in the booklets, every booklet is eligible, you have for every student. If you're non-assessed, then on page 2 inside that booklet, you have to give the reason why they are non-assessed. Are they being non-assessed because of parental opt-out for religious objection? Right? Are they not being assessed because of parental objection for something other than religious objection? Because they do have in a book for that. Or did they just not show up? Did they just not come for the entire testing window? You know, if there's a non-assessed booklet, they all go in. So that's why I was able to say that, you know, in my statistics, how many actually were non-assessed students. Because, you know, when I got the reports back, I got that information. That's how I was able to calculate that.
And then those students are counted as basically below basic okay, thank you.
So that's part of the answer.
That's
Is
part of it,
that
yes.
Zero for 13% of our kids.
Yeah, because they really, it's gonna, you know, there really is no such thing as, the lowest score is like 800. They're just blank across the board. You know, and they get the below basic in the end.
That really hurts us.
It does.
Yeah.
You know, and
And
that's
it's hard to explain, but you explained it tonight.
it's a very difficult thing. And to be honest with you, when I called out to Harrisburg, you know, it's like, oh my goodness, we forgot about this. You know, we just didn't address it. We just didn't think about it. You know, it's kind of an afterthought. But you know, they called us back and said, nobody will budge to waive it at this time. Then we had to go through with what we had to go through.
But for this year, how do we keep the number at 95% or over? It's for this year. How do we do that, Joe? How do we get the kids to participate?
Well, I think it's an effort at the elementary level. Last year, our participation rates were a little bit higher, and elementary schools did not make that low-performing list. They follow that same part of the code. They were good. At the high school level, I know that this year Mrs. Dunker has been meeting with teachers and also with students, making sure that we impress upon the students the importance of taking the test, showing up for the test. We'll have more latitude for make-up exams and make-up windows. Last year was a challenge for students who elected to remain remote. It was very difficult to get them to come in and actually take the test. So that was a challenge. So this year we do have, the window has been extended a little bit longer, so we will have the opportunity for the students who don't show up during the testing window, so that when they do report, and they will, they report to school. When they report to school, then they're given the test.
I have 2 questions. So do we count differently the parents that opt out? Do they still count as 0, or so it's not, if you do it properly, it doesn't count in the denominator, it's still a 0 is a 0? And secondly, can we see, is there a particular grade that did more poorly than another grade up here? I mean, can we see where the distribution is and know where to target our efforts?
And to clarify as well, as far as the grade level, the PSSA, we need to remember, PSSAs are given at 7th and 8th grade only.
Right.
When you get into the high school level, then you transition to the Keystone exams. So the 2 grade levels that we're looking at here at the junior, senior high will be 7th and 8th.
We'd be 7th and 8th. And like I said, on average, when I took all the math, the ELA, and even in science for the 2021 school year, the average deficiency that we had from the previous non-COVID, which was 18-19, was about 15% across the board. if I had to say which grade level kind of had the most, it would be grade 7. So they were down like 22% in math and 27% in ELA, where the 8th grade wasn't down so low, and it kind of brought the average up over the time. So if I had to pick one from the other, you know, it would be the 6th graders going in the 7th grade for last year. Would be the one.
And plus, as Joe said, one of our problems is we have 6 grades in this building. If we had a if we had a separate junior high school and a separate senior high school, that would have solved some of this problem, right?
That would solve some of the problem,
Yeah.
because we were always considered a junior, senior high school. So, you know, when they start comparing schools, like when we talked about the Pittsburgh Business Times, and they compared Carleton Junior, Senior High School to, say, Montour, or other, you know, 9 to 12 schools, you know, we have to include our PSSAs, and across the state, PSSAs in grades 7 and 8 are probably the lowest in the state on average. You know, so yeah, that is also part of the problem. You know, another thing that compounds the problem with this one is, this was even very hard to audit. Because included is the PSSAs, excuse me, but the Keystone exams. Now, if everybody remembers, when they canceled the Keystone exams, they started throwing in those non-numerical proficiencies to the students. And they really weren't really specific on how they were including the PSSA exam, or excuse me, the Keystone exams into this equation, because, you know, were they counting the non-numerical proficiency? There's not a number that goes with it. They were just proficient. They counted as the proficiency rates, because included in these numbers are supposed to be the 11th grade students in the 2021 cohort. You know, they weren't real specific on how they kind of dealt with that. So, you know, auditing the test scores was very difficult to do at this particular point for this particular thing. So hopefully it'll at least be a 1-year kind of situation. We do our test scores last year, we do our normal performance that we always do, and we'll be off that list before you know it. That's kind of the goal. This is kind of like a flash in the pan, because somebody overlooked a very obscure law. Is the way I see it.
I want to circle back to one of the points that you made
Yes.
early on, which is that this is one kind of data point among a sea of data points, and I don't want to lose that point. But I do want to suggest maybe that the Education and Tech Committee of the board do a deep dive into those other data points that you mentioned. So if we can look at, you know, what do our classroom grades look like? Is there, you know, you mentioned that there are other tests where students are scoring below basic in. Can we take a look at where our students are not performing as well as they were pre-pandemic, so that we can do targeted interventions where students need it most?
And we can do that. Prior to the pandemic, when we, you know, for folks who were on the board before it, I do a pretty long data presentation that goes about it. Jim's sheet, you know, where I also compare our data, you know, to our you know, to the state. I also take a look at in the data findings of how they compare their classroom grades, because that has a big indicator as well. You know, if 90% of our kids are getting an A in algebra, but only 30% of our kids are passing the test, there's a curricular disconnect there that we need to look at. You know, doing it with this type of data, very difficult. Very difficult, because you're not under a normal classroom situation. But as we move forward, yes, that's the kind of things that we do in our education committee, to sit down and look at that data as we go. Any other questions?
A couple quick ones.
Yeah.
The assessment that they gave us was based on PSSAs for 7th and 8th graders, Keystone exams for what grades?
The cohort. It's only for the cohort, 7th grade cohort of 2021. So it would be this year's 12th graders or last year's 11th graders. It's their cohort that they use for the Keystone exams. Those are the ones that skipped, you know, from 2 years ago, because of the pandemic, that they were given a waiver that says they get a non-numerical proficient. Now, some of those students Over time now, because of Act 158, I don't want to keep confusing on the law, that's for the new state graduation requirements. You know, the first one says, you know, you have to pass all 3 of your Keystone exams. Well, they're the first class that's going to graduate under Act 158, right? So if you got a non-numerical proficient in algebra, you got a non-numerical proficient in biology, and then last year, you know, you took the literature exam and you got a basic, right? To access pathway number 2, you had to take biology and algebra to get the numbers. And this is where it became confusing, is did they count those numbers as part of this particular data set?
So they didn't.
We don't know.
They didn't define.
They really didn't define it, no. You know, I think Dr. Brennan, when we got the phone call, they just said, just send the letter out. And
Can we ask for a
I mean,
clarification?
I can try, but, you know, normally when we get a data set, I was able to, a few years ago, audit that data, you recall. I was able to audit the data and found out, you know, that we didn't belong on the list, and they ended up taking us off.
Right.
This was extremely difficult. They didn't even send us the data at all because, you know, it seems like there's a lot of variables involved when we look at it.
Because I'd be curious, I think we'd all be curious to know what they evaluated us against.
Right.
And just as you found out a couple of years ago because of your due diligence, you dug in and found that it wasn't valid. So
Right.
is this year's assessment valid or not? That would be an interesting data point to know. And then let's just say we can assume, we can make some assumptions about what they did test. So 7th and 8th grade PSSAs from last year, 11th grade Keystones from last year.
No, the last year's cohort. Now, the way the Keystones work is your highest scores for as many times you take the test up into your second semester of your junior year. So they take your highest score, so it's not like a one testing type of thing. So whatever your highest score was, when they cut off your cohort, whatever you are at the end, that's what you get calculated for.
But they were 11th graders when they cut it off.
Yeah, they're 11th graders when they cut off.
So if we take those 3 pools of kids, we have pretty lengthy data going back years of what that grade level, how they performed on those tests going back, say, a decade. So we can even look at how have those groups performed. And it's up and down based on year. Every class is a little bit different, every group of kids is different, but we can see some sort of trend line pattern. And there have been times when the teaching staff and the administration has made specific efforts to improve a certain group, and there have been improvements, so that changes. But it would be interesting to see how does this set of data compare to the last 10 years of data that we have that's reasonably consistent. Because I think you had said that of the kids that did take the test, you saw 15% drop overall.
Overall.
Is that consistent? Is that based on that kind of analysis where you looked at?
Based on this cohort of children.
Right. These 3
Based on-
groups kind of.
Right. So, like I said, last year's 7th and, or like 2018, 19, the last time they actually had a normal PSSA testing environment, I kind of went back to those and said, where were the 7th graders at that time? Where were the 8th graders at that time? You know? So I kind of focused on a PSSA because that had the most fluctuation because there's too much at the Keystone area right now that's very gray.
So the Keystones, the 11th graders did okay.
Yeah, because I get to use the non-numerical proficiency when I did the data. So they're looking pretty good at the 11th grade level as far as their Act 158 graduation requirements. You know,
It was the 7th and 8th graders.
but the 7th and 8th grade with the PSSAs, they're the ones that kind of took the 15% hit.
Okay. And I don't know how they score PSSAs, but I think you alluded to the fact that it isn't like a 0 to 100 kind of score.
It's not,
a
no.
different range, so.
They kind of have like scaled scores based on, they have a raw score and a scale score, and they kind of do it that way. And it's not even, the scale is not even what most people would say consistent. You know?
Just thinking out loud, I think Susie had asked a question. If somebody doesn't fill it out at all, you don't get a 0 per se.
You
get
don't
some sort
know.
of
They would
baseline.
probably go to the lowest scale score that they have and say this
So you
is
get
what-
credit for turning in a booklet. You get some kind of
Yeah,
baseline.
some kind of, yeah.
Okay, but it's, So if you have a student who has not done well on that exam, if they made an attempt and they answered all the questions but they didn't do well, in the normal 0 to 100 range, they might get a 50. Somebody who doesn't fill it out at all gets a 0. Somebody who does perfect gets 100. Is that kind of distribution available or calculated in that fashion with this? In other words, can we do an analysis to say, of the 85% roughly that took it, or 86% that took it, did they get the equivalent of a 25 on the exam? Meaning, did they close their eyes and start drawing pictures of balloons? Or did they actually make an attempt and did they just not do well? Is there any way to kind of glean that kind of insight about what happened?
It could be done, but I would challenge the validity of it because you don't really know their intent. We had here at the board meeting a parent that was questioning the Keystone exam because the students' overall performance was very low. But when I looked at the students' data over time, third grade on, they've always been advanced and proficient in everything. So can we, look at the data and say, well, the student, tried their best and they just got a below basic? Or was there something more, and I offered this to the mother at the time, that it's very possible that a score like this, based on all the other test scores, that they might have skipped a number in between, like they might have skipped number 3 and put the answer number 4 and number 3, the number 5 one and number 4. I mean, that could very possibly happen too, that caused that score to be so low, considering all the history that the student has had with the PSSAs up until that point. We can also look at, and there's something that's called a PBOS projection score. And we've looked at those in the past, not during the COVID type of thing, but when we talk about PBOS and we talk about growth and things of that nature there, they look at under the PBOS and they say, okay, based on everybody who ever tested, I'm going to use third grade as an example, everybody who's ever tested in the third grade, all right, they have a certain testing history. And based on certain testing histories, this is how these students performed in grade 4. So now they make a projection and say, if you have a very similar testing history to all these students, then we can project you should do this in grade 4, right? So under a normal testing situation, if you would look at projections and how the students scored for the projection, we can look at that, and we have done that and looked at that in the past. However, when you're dealing with the pandemic, that's not a normal situation, and I don't even think they put out the projections for the past 2 years because they really don't have anything to base it on. They skipped it one entire year, so you can't even rely on the projections because it isn't a normal educational environment. It's not a normal testing environment. It's just not a normal situation across the board.
And that would be really interesting, though, is to take those 100, 200 anonymous students and look at that assessment back 5-6 years and look at how close they tracked, how their actual test scores each year tracked to that projected test score each year, and then what did they do in this year, in the 2021. That would be a fascinating data analysis, and see, did 30% of the class track roughly where it was supposed to be, 50% of the class was 20% below, and then the rest were 40% below, 50% below. What did that look like?
And we could do that probably under a normal testing year. We do give reports for those, and they kind of break it down into the ones that are projected, to be, did they make annual yearly progress? That's like that projection. They call it annual yearly progress. Did they meet it? Did they not meet it? Did they exceed it? And we do get reports on that, but again, we kind of in a data vacuum at this point. And how reliable is it based on it's not a normal testing environment under a normal testing year with, an educational environment that, we kind of put together, back in, March 13th of 2019 in about 48 hours.
My last quick point will be, and it's maybe a question for the rest of the board, but for those of us that have been on the board for a while, the one consistent that we have seen the last 10 years has been that 7th grade class has always seemed to struggle academically. And there's been a number of people that have proposed reasons why or asked questions about why, but I don't know that we've ever solved that. I don't know.
Jim, isn't this the 8th grade class, the class of
I think both.
26?
I think both 7th and 8th. I think
It's been both, and it's a problem statewide.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Wow.
it's a problem statewide.
What happened in those years?
There's a lot of things that happen in the middle school year.
I mean, when they were
But-
born or whatever?
No, no. What happens is, as the kids rise up through the grade levels, so are the rigor and the expectations of the standards. I could go back to the legacy standards a few years back before they adopted the PA core. Totally different set of standards, totally different type of test. The rigor wasn't as high at that particular point in time. When they brought the PA core standards in, a lot of the content that was normally taught in 8th grade got moved down to 6th grade. Some of the things that were normally taught in 7th grade were moved on to 5th grade. And some of the content that were normally taught in higher grades have now been pushed down to the lower grades. And it seems like the middle school is the one that's most difficult trying to catch up to the rigor of those particular standards.
So it's really not their fault? That's just what happened?
It's part of the circumstance, but it's also, we can look at, the test scores we have by offering that, sometimes in middle school, we don't do as well in the open-ended questions as we should. Sometimes, the student looks at the question and says, well, I really don't know how to do that, and they write in the section IDK, I don't know. And a lot of times we, get to the students and try to explain to them is, as long as you read the question and you make any indication that you have read the question, they'll give you a 1. Try something, do something. Go down that road. Even if you're not sure, try it anyway. And you'll get a 1 and not a 0. But when we get a lot of test scores back, a lot of times we'll get to the part where they have the open-ended questions, we'll see zeros.
I don't want to delay or
Yeah.
prolong my comments any further, but the 7th grade thing would be my closing point.
Yeah.
I think we've collectively recognized that the 7th grade has always been an issue. Maybe it's something that's an issue for everybody, for every school. I know, Marcia, we've tried things, we've talked about it. Emily, you're new to the conversation, we would love to hear your thoughts. But it's a traditional weak spot. We've heard that the kids are just adjusting to the building, they're adjusting to their age and the natural things that are happening to them emotionally and mentally at that age. So it's a challenge overall, but how we can collectively find ways to embrace them and to ease that transition to this building, to that age, and that may help translate to better test scores, right? And help them get the number.
And one of the things I like to point out that has been done at the junior, senior high school over time was that there is somewhat of a middle school model, and they really handpick the teachers, to teach in that particular thing, that's in that particular grade levels, that are more conducive to those kind of students, and they've done a really good job of doing that. And that was working, because I believe that the last time I did one of those data presentations here, we were not that far off from the state average, if I recall. And we're never really that far off at the state average, regardless of what grade level. A lot of times, if the elementary schools were above state average, I think when we get to the 7th and 8th grades where we start getting either at or slightly below. And I think that's been kind of my reports for many, many years, And the ones that we miss below, I usually have it broken down. We miss it by 3 students, or we miss it by, it's not very much. So, we're doing, a lot to try to get our scores up. And I think if we would focus a little bit more like on the mathematics part of it and the open-ended questions, if we could just get those zeros become 1s, I can see that we can have at least a slight improvement. Because that might be the one point that people get over the edge, to become proficient as opposed to basic and vice versa. But it's not from a lack of trying, I will assure you that.
I think the reason you're getting so many questions is that we can't fathom based on what we think we know from our administration and our staff and our students. We have quality people top to bottom, and the assessment doesn't seem to match what we think is the reality. So if I might be wrong, or my assessment might be wrong, but I don't know.
When we talk about state averages, as far as PSSAs are concerned, that includes not only the high achieving schools, it also includes the lowest achieving schools. And when they take all the test scores across the entire state of Pennsylvania, and they take like 30,000 eighth graders, and they says, here's the state average, and this is where we are compared to that state average. We're always right around there, you know. And you know, it wasn't so long ago that we were sitting here telling everybody how we jumped 34 spots in the Pittsburgh Business Times, you know, about our test scores. And you know, it's just this pandemic. We just have to get over the hump and get back to business as normal. And I think things will start coming back as quickly. But it's unfortunate that this law kind of fell in the cracks, that we had to deal with this. And like I said, I think once we get over this hump, I think we should.
Thank you, Dr. Manich. And just one final report, just a superintendent's report. On the board agenda this evening is creation of a district psychologist position. The position that we're proposing would be an Act 93 position. The district school psychologist would have the responsibilities of reporting out of the junior senior high school, would provide the psychological services for the junior senior high school commensurate to what a school psychologist would normally do. Above and beyond that, making it into an Act 93 position. What was mentioned here this evening is we talked about the expansion of our CHILL program, the extent of the mental health issues that we have. So this position will also go through, they'll provide oversight for our CHILL projects. That started at Carnegie, expanded to the junior senior high school, eventually making its way down to Grafton in the 23-24 school year, and also be able to coordinate all services that are provided through AHN. The position will also oversee all types of contracted services that we provide through school-based mental health services, develop and implement and monitor district-wide Tier 1 interventions, oversee all of our outpatient mental health to hospitalizations, also residential and partial hospitalizations, and then also work with transition plans as students transition out into those services, and then also, more importantly on our end, is to work that transition on the backside coming back in to the school district as well. The individual will also oversee district-wide risk assessments, crisis intervention. They'll plan for district-wide individual, small group academic interventions, and provide support for special education teachers with implementing behavior plans as well. That position we have, as far as the creation on the board agenda this evening. What is not on the board agenda but will show up as far as subsequent positions is the addition of another counseling position at the elementary level. Will require a little bit of reorganization of the model that we are currently using. We have one school counselor that goes back and forth between the two elementaries, between Grafton and Carnegie, and we currently have two psychologists, one at each building. We're looking to create an additional counseling position so that each of our elementary buildings will have a school counselor, but then also reorganizing the efforts of our school psychologists so that one school psychologist will take care of the elementary needs, and the Act 93 position will take care of the high school, and then also provide services down to the elementary as well, with the oversight and taking on overflow of evaluations as well, if necessary. When we take a look at the American School Counselor Association recommends one school counselor for every 250 students. We are a school district of approximately 1,300 kids, and making this addition of a new counselor aligns us much closer with that 250 to 1 student ratio, with 4 school counselors of 1,300 students total. So that brings us a little bit more in check there. When we take a look at the National Association of School Psychologists, that group has a recommendation as for every between 500 and 700 students, you have 1 school psychologist. That aligns us very closely with that model as well. What those organizations do not take into consideration also is the number of additional services that we provide, for example, with the CHILL project. So if we have our CHILL programs at Carnegie, at the junior senior high school, and then eventually at Crafton as well, that strengthens and pulls together all those numbers. And I think you'd be very hard pressed to find other school districts that have those ratios intact, where you have school counselor to student ratios and also school psychologist to student ratios that align with the recommendations as closely as what we do. So with tonight's, we're taking a look at the addition of an Act 93 position. At next month's meeting, we'll take a look at the reorganization of those positions, transitioning from 1 elementary counselor to 2 elementary counselors, and then taking a look at the workload of the elementary school psychologist as well, to make sure that we can put things in place to make sure that we have all those services that we do provide still remain intact. With the CHILL project, just again, as far as a reminder, the CHILL project has 1 master's level therapist that's assigned to each of the CHILL rooms, and then they also have an educational specialist as well that is assigned to those CHILL rooms as well. So that's the model that we're taking a look at. Tonight is the first step that allows us to move forward with seeking and finding that district school psychologist, and then from there taking a look at the elementary counseling positions for which we would have to hire a new position, and then take a look at the reorganization efforts and what that looks like in regard to the psychological services that are provided for our students. Also, just a reminder, we put in the most recent Cougar Connection parent forums that are coming up. They begin next week. The first one will start at Crafton Elementary School. That's April 27th. That's on a Wednesday. That'll start at 6:30. We'll be meeting in the library. The following week on Wednesday, the junior senior high school. That's May 4th, 6:30 at the CCC. And then finally at Carnegie, May 11th at 6:30. That'll be in the auditorium. That meeting corresponds with the PTA meeting that is normally held at Carnegie. So what I look to do is continue the parent forums to extend on a regular basis throughout the course of the school year. And what they're designed to do is solicit feedback from parents, listen to questions, concerns, ideas, and be able to formulate, as it adds to our strategic plan, and moving forward to review the services that we provide to our students. So we welcome individuals to attend. Also, along with that, eBlast was a link that goes to a survey to help fill out any types of topics that parents wish to discuss during those evenings. We can integrate those into the agenda as well. And one final note, we do have a Pittsburgh Penguin MVP among us in the crowd here this evening. An MVP stands for Most Valuable Principal, and that Most Valuable Principal is Mrs. Marsha Burleson, who was recently recognized as an MVP.
Where are your skates?
I forgot.
By the Pittsburgh Penguins, and also the Grable Foundation and the AIU, who comes up with, they get a list of recommendations and nominations. There's a process and procedure that's put in place that Mrs. Burleson would have had to go through, and she was selected. And I believe it's a true reflection of the work that she does at Crafton Elementary School. She does an outstanding job. She's extremely innovative, and I think her genuine care and concern for her students and for her families at Crafton does show. And I believe that she's an MVP, not just for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but also for the Carleton School District. So thank you, Mrs. Burleson. And that's what I have for my board report.
Any questions? Moving on to committee reports, Parkway West, Director Apple, anything to share?
Defer to Chef.
Pathfinder, yeah, thank you, Joe. First of all, from the March 16th meeting, we got the highest opinion in our audits, which is a very good thing. We're going to have graduation on June 8th at 10 o'clock with a huge class graduating, 26. But that's because 13 of the kids were repeats because the state allowed that because of COVID. I am really surprised. I never really noticed this at the school, but there are 4 boys for every girl in Pathfinder. That's amazing, the disparity. We have 98 kids. We have 5 rooms for kids with autism. We have 3 of the Pride kids, 3 classrooms, 2 classrooms for life skills, 2 classrooms for multi-disability support, and the school is completely full, and we have a waiting list. We're waiting on a playground because the Rotary Club, South Hills Rotary Club, donated $8,000 to the playground. And well, let's see, and they did have a pie day where the principal got pied, and I'd like to throw it out for all 3 of our principals to be treated to a pie day, and maybe even our superintendent before school ends. Think about it. That's the end of my report. Thank you. What do you say?
We had a pie day, but we brought pie in to eat.
My show of hands.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Shaz, I'm not sure if we had any meetings. Does anybody?
So actually, Saturday will be the student forum. The speaker, Charlie Batch. Dr. Kreider and myself will be there. I don't know if anybody else responded, if they're able to go. And this year's theme is overcoming obstacles, embracing opportunities, and sharing success. Carleton has 2 nominees this year, senior Dominic Hankey and Regina Schaefer. They limited to 2 nominations per district, but we'll have good things to report after that.
Thanks. Legislative PSA.
I think he gave George his turn.
George had to go.
Oh, well, I was confused.
No, that's all right. No, okay, good.
Let's circle back. Parkway. Sorry about that.
So Parkway had a meeting on April the 4th, and we talked about a bunch of stuff, including Skills USA competition, which 29 Carleton kids, or 29 kids from Parkway went to, and Carleton High School had 2 first-place winners. That if you win the regional, you get to go to the state competition. It's a very prestigious thing to do. So we had Jocelyn Griffin and London Lee. The project was a promotional bulletin board, and we had a second-place student, Jacob Hughes, in welding fabrication. So Jocelyn and London will be going to the state competition. As far as the third quarter directors list, we had 14 of our students on that list for their academic excellence. Put this out there for our principals. We have Parkway is doing their annual summer camp, which is, I don't know if you all have gotten, but if you don't, I have a flyer for you. And what it is it's 2 days, June 21st and June 22nd. All students who are entering into grades 6 through 8 are welcome to attend. They get to choose 2 programs. They'll do a morning in one, an afternoon in another over both days, and they get lunch. And it's a great way to kind of explore what kind of options are out there for students at Parkway. So hopefully get the word out to kids in those grades and their families. And then finally, with the talk of the testing, things like that, I'd just like to mention that Parkway West students, they can take what's called the NOCTI, which is the National Occupational Competency Testing, in lieu of the Keystone exams. And Parkway West did extremely well, even in the face of the pandemic and having remote school and things like that, which for career technical centers is a real challenge. They had a pass rate of 96.6%, which is really outstanding. It's basically all but 5 kids passed the exam, so it's pretty terrific. I think it's worth recognizing. So I think that's all I have. I've also got the graduate placement report. It's a survey report on students from the 2021 class as far as what they've done, whether they've gone on to their chosen career in their chosen field or secondary education. Have this if anybody would like to take a look at it. That's all I have.
Thank you.
My turn. Now my turn. Okay, so the Pennsylvania State of Education report came out, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that for those who haven't had a chance to read through it, or for those who didn't have access to it. So I'm just going to read a little bit of what is in that report. So it was created in 2017. Since its creation, the annual State of Education report serves as the barometer of not only key indicators of public school performance, such as standardized test scores and school finances, but also the timely challenges that public schools are facing and how they are coping with them. So the data in the report is examined for differences between school districts in rural, urban, and suburban communities. And the data in this year's report comes from 3 primary sources: chief school administrators from school districts, a survey of Pennsylvania parents with children in K-12 school, and the compilation and analysis of publicly available data such as information from the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the National Center for Education and Statistics. So that's where we're getting our information from. Key findings from this year's report: the biggest challenge in school districts is staffing shortages. So I don't think we're surprised to hear that. 99% of school districts reported experience a shortage of substitute teachers. 80% of districts also reported shortages in instructional aides and drivers. Budget pressure, the mandatory charter school tuition payments were a top source of budget pressure for the 3rd consecutive year, which we've talked a lot about that. And keep an eye on that. And upcoming for the Advocacy Day next week, that is one of the main topics that people are going to be talking to our legislators about. 2/3 of parents who were surveyed, 66%, with children in a school district rated their school districts as having done a good job of balancing health and safety with providing a quality education since the start of the pandemic. So that was just some of the highlights from that report that I thought might be important for people to hear. I wanted to mention again, PSBA Spring Advocacy Day is the 25th. I am planning to participate in that. They are having in-person advocacy in Harrisburg. I'm not going to that. I'm going to do the virtual part of it because I can't quite make the trip. But again, they're really going to focus on the charter school funding reform and the impact of state funding and providing critical resources to the schools. And one last thing I wanted to remind everybody: Election Day, primary election day, is Tuesday, May 17th. So that's the legislative and PSBA. Shall I go on to the foundation?
Yeah.
We didn't meet.
Short and sweet. Thank you very much. Any questions on any of the committee reports? If not, we'll move on. Under section 4 miscellaneous, there's 4 different items. I'll entertain a motion to approve the following 4 items. Number 1, to approve the additions to the list of conference and field trips for the 2021-2022 school year as submitted. Number 2, to accept the bid in the amount of $1,765,000 from M.A. Dunn Construction Company for the Craftston Elementary School miscellaneous upgrades, according to number 21-S23-01, to include the alternate G1 to replace the exterior light fixtures. Number 3, to approve a memorandum of understanding between the district and the Confederation of Teachers collective bargaining unit as entered for the remainder of the 2021-22 school year as submitted. And number 4, the memorandum of understanding between the district and the secretarial cafeteria aides collective bargaining unit as entered for the remainder of the 21-22 school year as submitted. I have a motion for those 4 items.
So moved.
Moved by a second.
Second.
Second, thank you. Any questions? If not, vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Under Under Section 5, Finance, we have 2 items. I'll entertain a motion to approve number 1. The following reports as reflected in the April 2022 financial report booklet or packet. March 2022 Treasurer's Report, March 2022 Investment Report, March 22 Board Summary Report, March 22 Athletic Fund Report, and the March 22 Junior Senior High School Activities Fund Report. And then item number 2, the check register for March 25th, 2022 and March 28th, 2022 in the amount of $357,103.05. A motion for those 2 items.
So moved. Second.
Second, thanks. Any questions? Not the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Under 6, personnel, we've got several items, a total of 9. I'll entertain a motion to approve number 1, the resignation of head supplemental basketball coach Michael Cozy. Number 2, to approve Cynthia Eddy for the position of homebound instructor for a high school student beginning immediately until the end of the 2021-22 school year, 5 hours per week, at an hourly rate of $60 for the terms of the CFT collective bargaining unit agreement. Number 3, to approve Lindsay Merlowski for the position of homebound instructor for an elementary school student beginning immediately until the end of the 21-22 school year, 5 hours per week, at an hourly rate of $60 for the terms of the CFT collective bargaining unit agreement. Number 4, to approve Christina Foley for the temporary position of Class 1 Secretary at Carnegie Elementary School, retroactive to March 28th, 2022 through April 22nd, 2022, and consistent with the terms of the SCA collective bargaining unit agreement. Number 5, to approve the following teachers as after-school tutors at the junior senior high school, retroactive to April 5th, 2022 through May 25th, 2022. Teachers per diem rate and consistent with the terms of the CFT collective bargaining unit agreement. For math, Christine Garland. Science, William Pelosi. Social studies, Laura Begg. English, Zeffie Carroll. Number 6, to approve Brian Harowitz and Andrea Harity to facilitate the Carlington Summer Academic Program, CASP, beginning June 20th through July 21st, 2022, Monday through Thursday, except for July 4th, from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. Teachers will be compensated at the per diem rate, consistent with the terms of the CFT collective bargaining agreement. Number 7, to approve Kimberly Sumter as the Title I Elementary Reading Specialist Math Teacher, Summer Tutor, for the non-public students at Carnegie Elementary starting June 21st through August 11th, 2022, on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., with an hourly rate of $50, and consistent with the terms of the CFT collective bargaining unit agreement. Number 8, to create a district school psychologist position within the Act 93 agreement. Number 9, to rescind the letter of intent to retire as submitted and approved on March 8th, 2022 by Craftsman Elementary music teacher Margaret Crayor. Do I have a motion for those 9 items? So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion or questions?
I'd like to talk a little bit about the tutoring, because we have a number of different tutoring opportunities, and I'd like if you could just kind of summarize who is served by each one of these different programs. Because I a lot of the parents have asked us tutoring opportunities for their students.
Yeah, so Mrs. Dunker, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that we've had Cougar Den, we've had Cougar Corner, we've had a lot of different type of Cougar branding for the types of services that we provide. In this particular case, the Cougar Den is designed for any student in grades 7 through 12 who feels that they need additional support in the content areas of math, science, English, or social studies. It could be a student who has missed a few days of school, goes in to get a little bit of extra help for tutoring, or it could be a student who's failing right now, wants to improve their grade to at least above a 45% so that they qualify for our summer programming.
So that's currently available, and it's initiated by the students if they want to participate?
That's correct, and each of the teachers, each of the grade levels know that we have the program running, so they can make recommendations to the child and say, I recommend that you get the tutoring services after school. Now they run 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. 2 of the content areas on, I think, math, science run the same day, and English and social studies run on Wednesdays. So they're for hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes, something like that, where students could also, they could hit both those content areas in the same day to
Do you
get
have
the
any idea what participation has been like for that?
participation rate. I'd say on average we have maybe 6 students showing up per day. And the teachers log in the number of students who attend. The data is tracked on a spreadsheet. Mrs. Dunker has access to it. I believe I have access to it also to take a look, and student name is recorded, and just a brief part is what content area that the child showed up for the additional support for. The other program that we worked on beginning last year, extending into this year, both semesters, doesn't have a Cougar type of identity name to it. It's just a program that's designed for our seniors, and it would be for those seniors who throughout the past 2 years have not completed some coursework and are looking to remediate some of that coursework. So as opposed to going to summer school in their senior year, to help them meet and reach their graduation needs on time, to help remediate during the school year, that program was just for seniors only. So we actually have 2 types of programs. One is a pure tutoring, that's the one that we're approving tonight. The other is more of a remediation during the school year program that's been in place for the past 3 semesters now.
Thank you. And there's an activity bus.
Yes, there is an activity bus that leaves here between 4 and 4:15.
4
So
days.
that 4:15?
4 days a week.
4 days a week. And so this program, all the students that attend have access to the activity bus. There is a small lap in time where the tutoring program is over, but we do have personnel on staff up in the shop. And students can go up to the shop and they're supervised up there until the end of the school day. Or if students want to leave and have their own transportation, they can elect to do that as well.
I'd like to talk about item number 1, Mike Cozy's resignation as the basketball coach. I just, he's been doing it for 10 years and brought so much value to the students in the school district that have so much stature, not only as a coach, but also as a mentor and a teacher involved in that program. And I think that he's leaving the program in a really solid place. I'm sad to see him go, but I do know that because he's a friend, I know just how much effort he puts into that and how much time. And I really want to express my gratitude for all that he's given to the school and the program and the students.
Yeah, and I echo that. Mr. Cozy has been a great leader and a great motivator for our students over the past 10 years, not only in the classroom, but as far as the extracurriculars as well. Generally, we don't put resignations of positions for supplemental for coaching positions, but we did want to put his in there, 1, just to recognize his service, and then also 2, just to have the recognition that it was not because of his contract was not renewed, but it was due to a well-thought resignation that he's thought about for the past few years. And as you mentioned, he does leave the team in very good standing, and I think will be active in the sense of following and cheering on the kids as they participate in the future years. Thank you.
Joe, thank you for pointing that out. And I'll also say 21-4 this year, so that was his legacy he left for the school, his record of 21. Thank you. Too bad. Congrats, Coach Cozy. Any other questions or comments on the motion on the table? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And a double congratulations to Coach Cozy. Thank you. Under Section 7, student activities, Dr. Kreider, anything you want to bring up there?
No.
Okay. Board, old business. Any old business from any board members? New business. Any board members have new business? None. Audience, open forum, questions, comments from the audience? None? Okay. Board members, any open forum questions, comments? Nope. Where's Dr. Mendoza when we need her?
So
Second.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I heard a movement in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.